Well, welcome back, everybody. This is episode 9 of What's Next Beyond Service. And episode 9 is Angels Among Us. And we'll be talking a lot about that here in a few minutes. But before we do, I just want to say hi to Sarah Carell. Sarah, thanks for being on board again today. And, hey, please feel free. I know you have an affinity for our guests that we'll be talking to today. So feel free to ask questions and, anything you think of, just let's talk about it. So let's keep it wide open. So, okay, well, hey, this has been a crazy week for me. I know there's so much going on with everybody nowadays, but my youngest daughter is out of country now, going to grad school. And there's with, COVID, some places are a little behind the US, and she's been dealing with some crazy stuff. And I think I just got some good news as it applies to her. So I'm pretty fired up about it. We'll see. After this show, I'll get back with her and hope and say a few more prayers that everything's good. So that's good timing. It couldn't happen any better right before this show, because I was a little frustrated, but I think all that's going away. So, all right. Well, look, the guest today that we have on is somebody that I connected with about a year and a half ago on LinkedIn, and they were going through a transition after their military transition. So this gentleman's got a lot of good things to talk about in terms of what that looked like for him, and then the things that he's doing now, in addition to the job that he has, his career path. He's doing other things that are helping people, and they're making a difference. That's why the show is called Angels Among Us. So what I want to do right now, and he doesn't know this, but this is a quick little intro here for him. I think most folks probably know what this song is, right? What movie this song was played with.
Classic.
Okay. Well, look, I had to do that because of Angels 14, and we'll talk about that towards the latter part of this interview. But I want to welcome aboard Jeffrey Knight to our program. Jeffrey Knight, not only are we connections, but he's a friend. I would trust this guy with my life. Yeah, he was in the Army, but I still would do that, right? But hey, Jeffrey, again, welcome aboard. And if you could just take a couple of seconds and just give us a quick introduction on who Jeffrey Knight is.
Scott, I appreciate that. And for one, thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be considered that you would have me on, you and the Power of a Story and Sarah Carell. So really appreciate that. But for me, this is one of those, What's Next Beyond Service is one of those things that's kind of near and dear to my heart, as well as all the veterans out there, being a veteran myself. So I spent 28 years in the Army as an active guard reservist. And so I was a little bit different than regular Army, but really spent 20 years active. An additional 8 of that was the part-time deal. So retired as a lieutenant colonel in 2015, and have been on my, I guess, civilian journey, if you will, since that time. And so it's been, we'll get into that a little bit. It's had its ups and downs, but all in all, there's some impactful things that came out of that. And so, that's what I'm hoping to dive into a little bit here, which I think is going to be good for your audience, Scott.
Oh, absolutely it will be, because a lot of the folks that I've talked to so far, I've been blessed. Sarah and I have been blessed with the quality of folks that are able to come on this program. And you're certainly top shelf guy, and we're thrilled that you're here, because I think the thing that's a little unique, or maybe a little different with what we're going to talk about, is your experience after transition. I always have a pregame with folks before they come on the show. We chat about the show, get to know each other a little better. And then we just kind of go through the flow and, what we'll talk about, what we'll stay away from, just so that things go well when we're having the conversation here live. And what he's going to talk about, what Jeff's going to talk about, is something that not everyone goes through. And so if you're in the position that he was in, this is going to be very timely for you. So before we go any further, I do want to do one thing. This will tell folks that don't know Jeff or who are not connected with Jeff on LinkedIn just a little bit about him. Now, I'm reading this from his LinkedIn page. This is, the about section on LinkedIn, where you can put what you want folks, employers, or whoever to know about you. So it's about midway down. And this is what he says: lead people effectively, develop them accordingly, and simply care about them, and watch an organization grow, not only in profit, but in culture. In culture. Right? So he's a servant leader, and he gets the importance of people. So I think that's a great starting point for this interview, is the fact that Jeff is a people person. He's a servant leader. His current job now, he's people and process development, and he's working at Cormark International. You can see that on his LinkedIn page. So Jeff, let's talk a little bit about your time in the service. Whatever it is you want to share with us. I know you talked about you were an engineer, and then at some point you transitioned and you were working with the CGI, or the Inspector General's office. And I can imagine you have all kinds of stories about that. But for brevity's sake, let's just tell me a little bit about some of the significant things that you did, impactful things, and let's talk about that.
Yeah. So no, I appreciate that. And so, I like to go back with in my history, which is really funny, because when I joined the military, I didn't join the military out of, a lot of people wouldn't say this, but I didn't join the military out of a great sense of that I need to serve, or I want to serve in the armed forces. The impetus for me for signing up was to pay for college. And at the time, I graduated high school. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for college? So that was the impetus for me going into the National Guard. And that's what I did. It's very interesting, because as I got into it, I went through basic training. I was enlisted and went through basic training, did all of that. And through that, it turns out that I actually really enjoyed it. And it was probably more so of the structure that the military provided. Not that the military is completely black and white, but in a lot of sense it is, in that there's regulations, there's signs for everything. So if you get lost or anything like that, just look for a sign and it'll tell you where to go.
Yeah, isn't that true? There's an SOP for everything you do, right? Waking up to going to bed.
Everything. So, I went through that. I was enlisted for a while. And then during college is when I contracted ROTC, decided to go to the dark side on the officer side, got out, and, I graduated. It was 1991, which kind of tells you how old I am, but it was also the drawdown year. So they were only taking a select few for active component. So I went National Guard. I then eventually went into the Army Reserve, did some civilian jobs for a little bit, and then found out about the AGR program, the Active Guard Reserve program, and decided to apply, which I did. And fortunately, I was able to make a career out of that. Just like anybody else, traveling from state to state, station to station. The only difference is I worked with reserve units, which were oftentimes in the communities, actually most of the time. So it was a little bit different flavor than being on an active component base or post or any of that. So going through the years, I was an engineer officer. I did the normal gain rank, platoon leader, executive officer, commander. And my command time was of course the best time of my career. I can tell you that. And the command time for a full-time AGR is not something that everybody gets. And so normally in the military, we all go through and if we want to go the command track, usually that's offered to us. The AGR program, it's a little bit different because there's so few spots for AGR commanders out there. You have to be selected. And so during my cohort, there was only 3 open company command positions. And out of, I don't know how many there were, I was one of them that was selected. And so I got the opportunity to actually command as a full-time commander in an Army Reserve unit, which has its challenges. And so it has its challenges, but it's got its benefits as well. So I went through command, and then after that went to battalion and group level training positions. And then the latter half, not to make too long of a story, the latter half of my career, the last 10 years of my career, I was an assistant IG, Inspector General, for 3rd Army when it was still at Fort McPherson, which then, of course, involved deployment over to Kuwait and other points. And then they transferred me out here to the University of Utah. That's where I'm currently at right now, in Salt Lake City, as an assistant professor of military science. And then I finished out my career as a command inspector general. A lot of people ask me, why did you go back and do inspector general twice? At the time, it was one of those things that, with a focus on teaching and training and inspection investigation, and basically it comes down to that mentoring. It allowed me to help soldiers out, to help commands out, to make things better. And so I finished out my career doing that. The other thought on that too was in the back of my head was exactly what we're talking about today in transition. Okay, how is this position going to assist me in the civilian world? And obviously, with a lot of those things, it matches a little bit with HR on the civilian side, but not a lot. So there's enough similarities. And so that was my thinking there. So I finished out my career as a command inspector general for a 2-star command on the General Special Staff, and I have no regrets whatsoever. So that gives you a little bit about my background in the military.
Yeah, that's very, very diverse too. It's some careers are pretty straightforward. Others, there's a lot of different things that you wind up becoming involved in from a career perspective, whether it's your occupational shifts, or working at a higher level. So it sounds like you've done, kind of a bit of all of that. And something that you said rolls right back to last week's show with Charlie Wells. He's a retired sergeant major. That's the highest enlisted rank in the Marine Corps side. And obviously it is, Army as well, but not everyone's military that may be listening to this. At any rate, his last job, he was working in Hawaii, in Oahu. He was the senior enlisted Marine on the base. And so he was also would go to like joint staff meetings. But the job that he had, he was out and about working with other services, working with civilians. And the same thing, he was talking about how that job really helped him in that whole transition phase to leaving the military. Because when you're talking to civilians and even other services, there are things that you do or say that are Marine centric that some folks aren't going to know what the heck you're talking about, right? So,
like
starting to realize,
like eating crayons.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, there's a Marine now. I think he was a Marine and served as a Marine at one point. That's made edible crayons for Marines. so now we can eat it and actually get some value out of it, right? But yeah. So anyhow, all to say is Charles did the same thing. So that's really cool. It is nice. It's a blessing, right, to have a job towards the end of your career that will help you move into that next chapter of life, because not everyone can do that, because sometimes the job you get is the job you get, especially in the military. So well, that's good, man. I'm glad to hear about your background. I'm sure folks are excited that they've got somebody of your caliber here to move into this next phase of discussion. So let's do that. I want to talk about your transition. Now, when we talked prior to the show, you were saying that transition, you thought actually you had that pretty good. In fact, you just alluded to the fact that your last job kind of set you up transition wise. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how your transition went, and then that post-transition roller coaster, the ups and downs that you had to navigate up until even, about a year ago, roughly. So So what can you tell me there?
Yeah. So, when you go back to transition and, I wasn't sure that I was going to retire. However, it was one of those things where I wanted to extend for one more year so I could make that decision. But they turned me down and said, "Hey, we're going to send you to either Fort Bragg or Fort Ord, California." And I wanted to go to neither one of those locations. Nothing against those two locations at all. It just wasn't something I was of interest in taking my family to.
Right.
And my kids were getting into high school and kind of settling in a little bit. And so I had 20 years in, so I decided to pull the trigger. That was only 1 year out. So it wasn't this whole thing where I said, okay, I'm 2 years out, so let me start my transition now, which is actually when I recommend people starting their transition. 2 years out, start doing the research, start talking to people, start doing all those things. So I began my journey at that point, and a lot of things came with that of, hey, what does it mean? What do I've got to do? Okay, I have my orders in hand, or I've submitted the packet to retire. And so I had to go out and find a whole bunch of information. And from the Army Reserve side, it's not like I have an installation there that I can, go over to and say, go over to TAP or whatever else and say, hey, where's it at? In my situation, when I actually went through TAP, I had to go to Fort Carson, Colorado, when I was located out here in Salt Lake City. And so, wow. Yeah, so little, because that was my out processing station. And so it was a little bit different, but throughout that time, I started doing the research. I started talking to people, or mostly talking to those that have already gone through transition. And that's a key right there. The more people that you can talk to that have gone through the transition already, or that are already in it or going through it with you, you'll gather the information that's vitally important. An example of one of those things is I was trying to figure out, okay, how do you do this VA thing, which a lot of people out there don't know.
That's a big one. Absolutely.
Yeah, and let's face it, that well, at least the Army anyway, and not cutting down on the Army, is just, but overall, the services, I don't think, do a great job. They do a great job in training and in war fighting and all those, but they do not do a great job in taking care of the folks that are transitioning out. It's kind of like, well, here's my retirement paper, here's your orders. Okay, go have at it. They're getting better than they were 6 years ago by far, and there's far more resources. So trying to dig into all that and figuring those things out is one of those things that you have to put in the time. You have to put in the time to go ahead.
Sorry, Jeff. Yeah, you absolutely do. And it's just like your career. Yes, there are people that are there to help, like career counselors, and there are mentors. Hopefully you've got mentors when you're in the military or as a civilian. It's very important. But the impetus always comes down to the individual. No one's going to hold your hand and bring you through your career, right? You have to understand what the building blocks are, what paths to take, what to do when career-wise, education, the schooling that the military has, if you want to get a degree or an advanced degree, balancing that out with your next move. I mean, there's so much to do, but transitions the same way. Unfortunately, you as the individual have to figure a lot of that out. And there are transition offices there that help. They only do so much. And as you said, they are getting better. I got out in 2012, and it's interesting. But I did want to say, you and I had a very similar exit out of the military. Without getting into all the details, same with me. It came down to a move that I wasn't necessarily ready to execute. And I was at the point where I could retire. My kids were coming into that same point of their time in school, high school. I would have been away from them, and it just wasn't in the cards. So I was fortunate that I could retire, but it came quickly. So I had a lot of catching up to do on the whole transition thing. I was a commander, so I just couldn't turn it over to somebody. I had to see it through to the end, and then went on terminal leave and spent some time with the kids, the family, and then started doing the career thing. I didn't have this nice plan that if I wouldn't have gone that route, I would have had a nice plan. That's what you do, right? You plan. But I had to adjust on the fly, and it worked out. It wasn't comfortable, right, at first, but yeah, and especially like you were talking about in your particular situation, not having all the resources right there on base where you can just go and meet with people and talk, having to go to a alternate location that's hundreds of miles away. And yeah, that is a different transition, and you have to own it. So.
Yeah, you really do. And so there was a lot of time on the phone. There was, and that began my LinkedIn journey as well. So, and the sooner that you can do that, and you see a lot of active service members right now getting on LinkedIn. That everybody's starting to get on board a little bit, but reaching out in that. So if we go back to that time where in that year that I'm looking for that job or my next move after I retire, the LinkedIn journey in those and the research on the VA and how to file a claim and all those things, the more you're prepared for that, the better. I did it while I was in the service, and I made sure that I went to the doctors, I went to everything to make sure that, hey, yeah, I've got this, bump on the back of my neck that, that has always been there. So write that down, please. So that it's recorded somewhere. And so that made that whole process a little bit easier, but I actually didn't file until after I retired, but I had gotten all of my ducks in a row first. So right. As you're going through that, think about that and think about the things that you have to, it doesn't matter what kind of pain that you have or ache, or even if it's a minor thing, get it checked out so that it's recorded. Because once you go in and file that VA claim, they're going to, if you go to a VSO, which I highly recommend, Veteran Service Organization, they're going to ask you, hey, so tell what's going on, what's everything there, and you start bringing up everything.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice, Jeff. And for folks that are active duty, you at the 6-month point to the end of your active service, your last day in service, you back it up 6 months, you can begin the process with the VA to do all the things that Jeff is talking about. And, even if you listen to this and you're, a couple years out, what Jeff said is absolutely right too. You got to get everything documented, because everything counts towards later in life. A lot of folks think, oh, hey, I'm a tough guy, I don't need this. Well, yeah, you're a tough guy, but it's not about being a tough guy or gal. It's about, at some point, you're older, and service it deteriorates your body. It probably depends on maybe what you did too, but this is something that's for later. Okay. And everyone who served rates a VA look, right? So you got to, sorry, somebody called, it interrupted me here, but anyhow, so you got to start at 6 months out, because you don't want to be at the point to where you're doing it as you're closing out your last few days, or you're out and then you're trying to catch up, because there's a backlog with the VA. I don't know what it is now, but when I got out, it was like an 8-month backlog. So I'm glad I finished it before I did get out, but I still didn't get the approval on everything VA wise until 8 months after I was out. And then I got back pay for those 8 months. So that was kind of nice to get a, nice little chunk of money there. But yeah, you've got to be doing those things. You got to be proactive. It's your health and it's your long-term, it's longevity for you, especially if you served and you have issues that the VA can help you with. So yeah, it went a little longer than that than I thought, Jeff, but it is a very good point.
Yeah, no, I mean, and so those types of things there, so you talk about the VA process, you talk about those things when you're transitioning. The other thing that you got to take a look at, and it's something that I did, and I forget where I learned it from, but one of the things that as you're looking for the next position, you're starting to look, okay, what do I want to do? What am I going to do? All of those types of things. There's a couple of things actually that I want to make sure we make a point on. And one of them is, so in my transition journey It was tell everybody you know when you're going to retire. And I don't care if it's, just a casual acquaintance. Tell everybody that you're going to retire and that you're going to be looking for your next part of your journey in your life. And here's the reason why I say that. So I actually was able to secure a position as an operations manager out of the Army before I retired. And due to all the leave policies changing and all that, with all the deployment and everything, I was carrying 120 days of terminal leave. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to use that, go on terminal leave and begin working in the civilian sector at the same time.
That's fantastic.
It was a very flush time, and something not that is normal, I don't think. But one of the reasons why I was able to do that is because I let everybody know. The job that I got was through a friend. Our daughters played soccer on the same team, who I happened to mention it to during a practice. Said, "Well, I'm retiring here and I'm looking for a position." And he was like, "What are you looking for?" And so, you go through that whole thing. Well, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And, and at that point, you're really not sure anyway, unless you're an engineer, degreed engineer or a doctor or something like that, that that's what you're going to go do. So it wasn't long after that I got a call from his partner in the company that he owns, and said, "Hey, Mark said, give you a call, and this is what I'd like to talk to you about." And so just through that connection, I hadn't applied for the position, didn't even know it was open. It was a manufacturing in a machine shop, which I didn't know how to spell manufacturing when I came out. And so that's why I say, tell everybody you know, because you never know when the next connection is going to be there. You don't know what it is, where it'll come from. And we all know, and all the experts out there and all that say, hey, it's the connection that gets it. And that's very true. There's a lot of other stuff that you got to do in between there too. But that was the key to my first post-transition, post-service job.
Right. And that's so smart to advertise it that way, because you're right. It's got to be a shotgun blast, right? Because you want as many people, as you said, to know as possible. And that whole networking thing is about relationships and building relationships. And obviously, you already had a bit of a relationship with the guy that was the soccer dad, right? And boy, isn't it funny how things work out? This little connections in life can turn into something more. And good on you. That's cool.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna so that's one thing I wanted to stress, the VA. That I wanted to stress. And then the third thing I want to stress too is it's a technique that I used. It takes a while, but if you're transitioning out, go back on a spreadsheet, however you want to do it. I actually hand wrote mine, simply because it engaged my mind a little bit more and forced me to do it. But I went back and I listed every single position that I held in the Army. I broke it down what the duties were. And you can do it in columns, however you want to do it. Took it in that. Then I transitioned that into, okay, how does this play in the civilian world? Now, there's some research that takes to do that. And that is, you got to look at a lot of job descriptions. You got to ask people, you got to talk to people, but you start breaking it down into, okay, so training and let's just use Inspector General. That's the easiest one. Inspector General, it was teaching, training, investigations, and inspections. And so, okay, what does that mean in the civilian world? Well, a lot of those skills can transfer over because we were trained in specifically for IG investigations, let's say. Okay, what did that bring with me? Well, it's not specifically the Army stuff, but it brought into the fact finding. It brought into trends analysis. It brought in those types of words, which are all civilian words. And so if you start breaking it down into those categories, it will help you determine, what skills do I have that are civilian related? And as we come out of the military, it's very hard for us to know the civilian speak. And that's a huge challenge. So if you break it down in chunks and bring it to where that is, and then get somebody to read it too that's already in the civilian world. Well, what the hell is that? No, you're talking about a Humvee. Okay, well, what is that? Well, that's a Hummer. Oh, Humvee is a Hummer. Okay, now I understand what that is. Okay, because that's, Hummers are in the civilian world too.
All right.
Sold commercially. So you have to translate that, and it's up to you to do that. Don't expect the civilian side to understand what you're talking about or to go that extra mile.
All right. Jeff, that's really cool that you sat down and wrote it out like that. I'm similar. Like anytime that I want to remember something, like if I was studying for something, I would always write it out. Because if I write it out, I remember it better. And by writing it out, I think your mind starts to work and engage. I'm very visual. And so I wish I would have thought to do that, because I can just, right now, I'm thinking in my mind, I'm seeing myself doing exactly what you talked about, and, drilling down into your capabilities, into the things that you did, job task wise, that help bring out those things that you're good at, those things, your experiences. And boy, talking about writing a resume, boy, that helps with that too, right? Because you can go back to that list to pull off as you create a resume. That, we all should have that master document resume that might be 5 pages that you pull from, and then you're crafting that very specific designed resume for whatever that job is, right? You don't give them your 3 or 5 page, you give them one that's specific to the job. So that's a great way to do what you said, because it gets you thinking, and then it helps make that master resume that helps make those other resumes that go out to the actual jobs you're looking to get that are tailored to those positions. That's really smart.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made a great point there, because that's another step within that process I was talking about, is then you can start looking at the civilian lingo, and then you can start matching it as well to what you think, if that fits into that. And then you can start asking people out there in the civilian world, hey, does this translate? Does this, and you've got to be curious, and you've got to ask, and you've got to get out of your comfort zone and move into that. And it's, and that brings you back to which I'd like to talk about, not right now, and that is finding that purpose as well.
Right.
And I'll do, for me, I'll talk about that purpose here, after we get done with this little piece
Right.
on my transition.
Right. Yeah, Jeff, and getting back to the civilian military interface, as folks are making that move, they don't have a Rosetta Stone, right? The civilians. And it is so important, because you don't even realize it, when you're talking. I remember at some point, after being a Marine for a while, going back home on leave and talking to family and friends, they're just kind of like, your language gets a little more colorful, right? When I was younger, it was pretty colorful. It's, it's better now, but they're just like, what does that mean? And, oh, okay. Yeah, it means this, and so if you're trying to get a job and you're having that problem, boy, that's going to be you're going to have a hard time. And it's not just the spoken word, it's the written word. So making sure that you're doing exactly what the wisdom you're imparting here is, that you're doing that work up front, and that you're connecting with these other people who are in the civilian world, and hopefully in the industry that you're looking to go into, that can help you with that verbal and, written transition, so that they aren't having to guess. And that puts you right in the zone. That's just one less thing that's an impediment to finding that job. So, all right. Well, so anything else that you want to talk about with that transition, or you want to talk about some of those other bumps?
Well, yeah, so some of those other bumps, I think it's a great time to do that. Those were a few of those things that I wanted to make sure that, at least I guess imparted on the audience, whoever's
Sure.
going to watch this. I can see my sister's watching it, so I have one fan, well, besides Sarah. So
And if your family is watching, then we absolutely have to keep it clean, right?
Nah, that's my sister. No, she when she's not around her children, she cusses like a sailor. So but yeah, so I mean, speaking of that, and I don't know if you want to lead anything into it, Scott, but I mean, I can just launch into that piece.
Well, yeah, just real quick. So when we were talking, it was good to hear that Jeff had a smart exit, smart transition. He put a lot of thought into it, and he owned it. And so he wound up being employed, as he said, before he leaves. But then over time, there's no perfect anything, right? Things happen in life, whether it's the economy, whether it's something crazy like COVID, or all those things coming together. So he had two things that happened after leaving, after being employed, having a good job. There's two events that happened between then and now, and that's what Jeff's going to talk about.
Yeah, so I came out and I wasn't sure, just real quick on my first job, I wasn't sure if that was going to be a long-term solution or not. And so it was kind of finding my way in regards to that. I enjoyed what I did. I learned a hell of a lot. Things like P&L, which is not something we deal with in the military, and other things that are on the civilian side. So I had that job. And then 2 years later, I was laid off. And so August of 2016, I was laid off from that job. Two of the owners came back into the company. So there was three owners there, and therefore they really didn't need a guy running the day-to-day operations. That was devastating. I can tell you that right now. I mean, it was, I hadn't had to worry about a job in 20 years. And then coming out, then it's kind of a reality. Not that I was naive that I couldn't be laid off or fired. I just knew that if they were going to fire me for one, then that's one thing, but I knew that I wouldn't allow that to happen because I'm going to do my job.
Right. What year was this again, Jeff?
This was 2016.
Right. And
so
I know that was a gut check for you, but how about your mental space? What did that do? Because just like you said, you never had to worry about a job. You've always been a go-to guy. What state of mind did that put you in?
Well, I can tell you, we struggle with our rank when we come out. So like you, Scott, I retired as Lt.Col. So you've got, at that point, you got a lot of different things going on. I like to tell people I retired as Lt.Col. It's just because I spent so many damn years in the Army. But there's more to it than that. But the mental space of that event, I mean, it's a significant emotional event.
Absolutely.
And it's because you're coming out with all these skills, with success in the military. You're doing those things. You get out in the civilian world and you have success. And I had success. It was just economics. It was a small business, economics, and I was, and for lack of a better word, I was an easy chop. And so that was then started my second transition. So we talk about transitions, and eventually I'm going to get to my third transition, which is what I'm on now. But I was, at that point, I had to reevaluate everything. I had to go back to the resume. I had to reevaluate. Hey, is this what I want to do? Is this the kind of thing that I wanted to do? The good that came out of that, there was a lot of stress. It sucked. But the good that came out of that was I started connecting more. I actually gained a mentor who was willing, who is still a mentor of mine, Janet Haskell. Out of the goodness of her heart, she reached out to me and we connected, and she started helping me. It just so happens she's a career coach. Fantastic lady. And she walked me through revamping my resume. So I started gaining more and more information. And I also had a little bit more credibility now in the civilian sector because I had worked there for 2 years. That transition took me about 4 months to get another job. At the level that I was looking at, and possibly, and as a matter of fact, the funny thing is, I really wasn't looking at the industry. I was looking at many different industries because, as you know, Scott, and a lot of people do in the military. We're specialists, but we're not. The military says to go do something. I don't know how to do that. Fine, move out, go do it. Great, here we go.
Yeah, absolutely right. Especially the more senior you get, whether you're officer or enlisted, the more senior you get, the more is required of you. And sometimes it's OJT, other times, maybe not, but the staffing thing, when you become a staff officer or on a staff, boy, you learn quick. There's a lot of things that you wouldn't do in other jobs, and learning how to brief, how to put a brief together. It sounds mundane, but there's actually a lot, especially when you're doing it for someone that's wearing stars, because they only have so much time, and you can't be doing this. You got to be doing this, and there's a sweet spot. I remember when I was at Third Mall, I was the G4 there for a while, and that's logistics for aviation ground support logistics. And there was a captain, young captain, great guy. He was briefing the general. The general asked a question, so he starts explaining, and then it was taking a while, and then the general's just kind of like looking to his left and right at the other, primaries, and then he's like, "Stop." He said, "Listen, when somebody asks you what time it is, tell them what time it is. Don't build a watch." You understand what I'm saying? Yes, sir. He goes, "What time is it?" So then he told him what time it was, and so he learned a lesson, kind of learned it in front of everybody, but it was very impactful, right? So anyhow, I'm bleeding into your story, but yeah, you absolutely wind up being a generalist in some areas, and you're, technically proficient in that main thing you do, but yeah, you've got broad shoulders. Yeah.
Exactly. And for me, it was, had I been an engineer officer my entire career, it might have been a little bit different story, but I wasn't a degreed engineer anyway. So, for me, I was an engineer officer. And so that's the kind of commands that I went into. So when I transitioned into my next position, which was the director of a school program, CDL schools, for truck driving in that industry, I didn't know how to spell trucking either. But because of that generalist nature, it's operations. And so you're running 5 different schools nationwide, which is very similar to where the level that I come out of. I never did have battalion command, but that's kind of the level that I was at. And so it was very similar to that in the operation, and it was dispersed. Fast forward to 2020, February 2020, the trucking industry didn't do well in 2019. The company I worked for, it affected them as well. And so they closed down 2 of the schools. So some of the writing was on the wall, but I'm a loyal guy to a fault. But one day they called me in and said, "Hey, Jeff, we're closing down 2 of the schools. We don't need your position anymore."
Wow.
Which I can tell you, if you want to talk mental space, that was a combination of an uppercut, a gut punch, and, getting your knees taken out from underneath you.
Yeah, I bet.
From a mental perspective, because it was one of those things I highly enjoyed what I was doing. Most of it was because of the people I was working with. We were providing, it was schools. And so we were providing people with an opportunity to do something better. That was my favorite part of that job, which kind of takes me back to my inspector general days.
Mm-hmm.
I love helping people.
Yes. Yeah. Jeff, that's the one thing, sorry to cut you off, but that's one of the things that drew me to you on LinkedIn because of that. I mean, that is written all over your face in a great way. The fact that you are so wanting and willing to help people, to advocate, to teach, to mentor, to spend your time doing things. And we're going to talk about that here, in a minute. But I just wanted to give you that plug because I think you do a fantastic job.
Well, I appreciate that, Scott. I do. And with this and, kind of continuing on with that story and we'll come back to that, so February I was laid off. March 2020, everybody know what happens then. It's the little thing called pandemic.
Yeah.
And then pretty much everything shut down after that. Everything froze, especially the level of type of position that I wanted to go into, or, so that I could continue to support my family, I could continue to grow and those types of things. So again, 363 days I was on unemployment, almost 1 year to the day I was on unemployment. Talk about emotional roller coaster. You don't know where it's come. Now, I will say this, I was much better off than many, many millions of people out there, in the fact that I had a pension and I had disability and I had medical care. So staying in for 20 years, absolutely 100% worth it.
Yeah, that was kind of the trifecta right there, right?
Correct.
Those three things. Yeah.
Yeah, that was able to help us stay afloat financially. Not, living large, but eking by. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Still wasn't going to rise to the level of, I guess, I don't want to say lifestyle because it sounds like I'm, on boats and stuff, but I'm not.
No, not at all. I mean, because that's only so much, right? And
yeah,
I absolutely.
And so it took me 363 days. So it comes back to where I'm working now with Cormark International as people in process development, or the continuous improvement manager, whatever you want to call it. And this one in particular too is a point that I want to make in telling everybody that you do, and never turn down an interview. Never turn down an interview. This position that I have right here, right now, in which I'm having a hell of a time too, and by that I mean a good time. Is that I applied for one position, was interviewed for it, but wasn't selected for that position. But they were impressed enough, or I bamboozled them somehow enough, that they said, hey, we didn't give you this job, but we wanted you to talk to the division president anyway. So that's kind of how I got this job. It wasn't even a job that I applied for. They were looking for, they were toying around with my position for a while. I happened to come into the picture and they said, maybe that's he's an option. And then from there, I got the job in February this year. Now, what I want to back up to in this particular one, before we move on to those other things that we want to talk about, and I know I'm taking up a lot of time.
No, you're fine. You're absolutely fine.
During that third transition was really where I found my purpose. So we're talking 2020. We're talking 5 years after I retired, 5.5 years after I retired. I believe I found my purpose, and that purpose was to simply help other people.
Amen.
One which I always like to help people anyway, but in my head, I was more focused on the civilian career and getting ahead and doing great things. What the last transition, so to speak, really brought into focus that it's not all about that all the time. It's, there was a time, and it was before the power of our story. This is Sarah Carell, who to this day I adore because of her space that she provided. It was prior to that I got hooked up with Mission 60. And Mission 60, ran by Jason Van Camp, former Green Beret, is a leadership development firm. And it was one of those where I decided I'd get his book because he said, I'm going to give it to you free. That's Deliberate Discomfort is the name of the book. And that book right there encapsulated everything that I'd ever believed in leadership. And I drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And one connection after another, it kind of morphed into an ambassadorship forum where it was kind of a referral system. And then from there, it morphed into, hey, do you want to do some leadership development facilitation for us? It's not a W-2, it's not a full-time job, but we'd like to give you a chance. They gave me a chance. Through that process, really, they provided a hand up to me and said, hey, and Jason Van Camp is one of those guys that said it. He told me, I believe in you, Jeff. And the impact of those words is unbelievably powerful.
It is powerful. Absolutely.
And
Jeff,
I didn't know. Go ahead.
Yeah, when somebody does do that, it opens up something in your heart and in your mind. And even though you believe in yourself, it's so powerful when somebody else that you respect tells you something like that. Not that you're looking for validation, right? But it is good to hear. And it helps you kind of take that breath and see things differently, right? You start to approach what you do a little differently. And something I do want to say real quick, because I don't want to forget this, Jeff, is when you talked about the interview process, about take every interview, man, what a great story and what a great piece of advice, because obviously what happened to you is tremendous. The other thing is you're getting experience interviewing. So you always want to take the interview, because that's just one more interview, more experience doing it, because you don't interview when you're in the military. But the fact that they saw in you what they saw, they said, look at this guy. This is the right guy for this other thing that we've got going on. So, they were smart folks. They saw what they saw in you, and now you're doing great things with this company. And that's it's exciting to hear, and it's a great thing to tell folks, that because you never know what's going to happen. You don't know what jobs they have going on. And a lot of times you get hired, kind of on the inside, right? Somebody at the company, or, there are other positions that they might not tell you about, and they have an opening. And if you fit and you have a great interview, that's icing on the cake. And but getting back to Mission 60, you also did something else with when you were going through that program that you were going through with them. There were gut checks along the way, right? And you were doing that during this time that you had been laid off on your second bump in your transition, if you will. What are some of those things? What were some of those things, and how do they impact you?
Yeah. So and Sarah, I apologize. I don't know if Mission 60 came before or after the Power of the Story, but they were all kind of in the same time frame. So those two spaces were things that brought me kind of out of that. I don't want to say dark, because that's not. It's dark, but it's not dark. It's just a mental challenge. And that is the biggest piece of any transition, of anything with the unknown. And for me, what that whole time frame did, and Mission 60, which is kind of back in the military family with Sarah's group and the Power of Our Story, it brought me back to the veteran community, and it brought me back to base. Really, is what it did. And at that point, things didn't become easier. But in my mind, they were easier to deal with, because now I had tribes.
There you go. Absolutely.
Now I had tribes that I could talk to. I could be myself. Not that I don't have family that I could talk to. Not that but it's different. It's different, because the family's always asking you, well, hey, what about today? What about tomorrow? What are you going to do next? Whereas these spaces allowed me to do that. And I didn't, there was a lot of interaction that I have. I'm still doing some contract work for Mission 60. And so it's because after this last unemployment, I said, I'm not going to be in a position where I don't have, something to fall back on, or
right,
something not to do.
And
so
that's absolutely smart, especially in today's economy. There are a lot of people that are doing this thing they call a side hustle, right? You're still doing your day on, stay on stuff, but you've got bandwidth, so you can do these other things that, can help offset, cost, can help, plus if you really enjoy doing it, and you do, because you're helping people, that's a win-win across the board.
It is. And that's where, diversify, just like you would a portfolio, I guess, just diversify.
Right.
During that time frame too, I got my professional in human resources. And so there were a lot of positive things that came out of this. I can't say it was all bad. There was a lot of positive things. And that biggest one is that, hey, I understand how much of a desire and a passion I have for good leadership. And it's just, it's always been there, but this just completely blew that up and said, you know what, leadership and all the things that I learned in the Power of Our Story in Mission 6.0. And then what we're going to talk about too, before we get off from Angels 14 and how that all kind of transitioned. So, you know, the biggest impact is the mental. If you allow yourself to get down, everybody does. That's okay. That is absolutely okay. But understand that it's also a part of the journey. When you don't understand it's a part of the journey, then it's a day-to-day grind that will continue to bring you down. And if you can slow your brain enough down to enjoy the journey, ups and downs, you'll be much better off.
No, exactly. You know, that's actually some of the best stuff. Everything you said has been, you know, again, because you're a top shelf guy, it really, that hits home, because life is tough, right? You know, you've got good parts of life, and there are things in life that, as you know, as you said, that suck. And there's things that are even worse than suck. And those things happen in life. And it's all in how you react to those things, whether it's a person or whether it's a circumstance. You know, you control how you react. And in tough times, it can be very tough to react the right way. And Jeff, that is one of the things that drew me to you on LinkedIn, watching you when you were doing your videos during this time. You were a sense of inspiration for me. You know, I probably never told you that, but you were, because you would tell a little bit of your backstory, and I knew your backstory from, you know, watching your videos, but you were always positive. Even if there was something that was difficult, you always had that positive spin on it. And that is something to learn from. There's grace there too. And, you know, I hats off to you that you were able to compartmentalize when you needed to. You're always looking forward. You're making lemonade out of lemons, as they say. And the inspiration that you give to other people, you have to know how incredible that is. And it's just like when, you know, you were told, you know, I believe in you. You know, I'm telling you that I believe in you too, in terms of what you're doing for other people, because you're making a difference, you know, and you're making a difference in people that might never tell you that too, because they're seeing your story on LinkedIn and they're following what you're doing with Angels 14, which is what we're going to talk about here. And I just want to tell you, I am just so honored to be a connection and friend of yours. And because there's no doubt, you know, once someone knows who you are, there's no wondering, well, you know, what's this guy up to? Does he have some other ulterior motive for what he's doing? And I would say, yeah, he really does. And it's what you see. He's there to help people. He's been down a path and he's survived. And now he's helping people because he's got experience in what it takes to transition and then how to navigate and deal with those ups and downs, not only in job, but in life, you know, in your career, but in life too. And so now I want to do this because this is something that I did earlier, but you know, I think it's important to do it again. And of course, sometimes you've got technical things to go through, but hey, this is for Dave and for Van again, and then all the folks that are part of the tribe with Angels 14. So that time it wasn't over my speaker, so it probably didn't sound as good, but my Bluetooth evidently cut off. But anyhow, Jeff, and I'm only doing this because of timing, because we're right at an hour. We've been having a fantastic call, but I do want you to have time to talk to the work you're doing with Angels 14. And again, that's the name of the show of episode 9 is Angels Among Us. And Jeff is like, you know, he's like Gabriel, and he's got this, you know, this flock of other angels that he's working with. But no, seriously, the work that you guys are doing with Angels 14, we've talked about it. I've come on and, listened and, taken part in the discussions and stuff. You guys have a what's the right word? It's a way to plug in to that tribe. You talk about tribe. You guys have built that tribe. You found a tribe, and now you've organized and you're building a tribe. And the work that tribe's doing for people to help them get into the right headspace, heart space, because life is hard, but life is beautiful too. And we got to remember those two things. And having folks that can help shepherd you in those areas of life, and people like you said that are, not everyone in your tribe is military, but most of them are. But I was thinking about this earlier today before this interview, and what you said absolutely resonates with me about not everybody in your family or not all your friends that didn't serve understand some of the stuff that we deal with in the military. And when you leave the military, if you leave all of your friends, boy, that could be really bad. You've got to keep those lines open. Yes, you've left the military, but you've got to stay connected with those folks or find other military folks in these new tribes. That is so important. So with that said, Jeffrey, tell us about the good stuff that you're doing with Angels 14.
So Angels 14. Angels 14 is something that was born out of my unemployment. It actually started because of my unemployment. So I had joined the power of our, I had joined the power of our story, this fantastic platform, and then the Friday calls too, which I'm so glad they're back. I hope I can make it tomorrow. But kind of it got me thinking, and not necessarily, it just got me thinking about what more can I do? What more can I do? Well, in comes a connection through Jason Van Camp, Mission 60, to Dave LtCol. Dave LtCol was a graduate of Warrior Rising, which is the nonprofit side, helping veterans give them a hand up in starting or accelerating their own business. And he connected me with Dave. Dave and I had a phone call one Sunday afternoon. I was looking for a job. I was looking for his help. And out of the blue, Dave, and both of you on this phone call know Dave. And if anybody does, you know how he is. But he just said, "Hey, Jeff, I got this idea. This is what I want to do, something bigger. I want to do something more." And that's how Angels 14 started. We didn't know what we were going to do. We just knew we were going to do something. And that's turned into weekly calls. And then that came into, hey, let's name this thing. Then that came into, yes, we have a logo now.
Hey, it's an awesome logo, by the way. That van, what can you say? Good job.
So, I mean, it's, and so basically what Angels 14 is, it's we're providing a space for veterans and their allies, or really anybody for that matter, that can come and non-judgmental. Doesn't matter where you're at in life. Doesn't matter if you're a veteran or not, but to provide camaraderie, community, and connection. And that is really the basis for that. Now, we also smatter in leadership principles and some other things. So we learn at the same time and we learn from each other. But really what it's about is it's about those three things: camaraderie, community, and connection. So many of us come out of the military missing that camaraderie. Then we don't have the community. We don't have the tribe. And then we're not connected anymore. And so we said, you know what? There are far too many suicides. There are far too many people going through rough times right now. We have to do something. And so that's what we're doing. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. But as you can probably tell, this Angels 14 is something I'm so excited about. And it's just a passion of mine. It's the favorite part of my week. Besides seeing my family and my children, that's where I like to be. And
that is so understandable. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we've had, we've had some impactful calls. We don't record it. And we do that because we want people to feel free to talk about that and talk about the things they're going through. And without worrying about, oh, somebody's going to hear this. And,
All
and
right.
so that's one of those things that's kind of there. You come to one of our groups, and whoever's on here, if they want to, they can, DM me or, find out and I'll send you the Zoom link. Come join us, see what it's about. You don't even have to get on. You just listen if you want. If you don't like it, you leave. And we have a lot of people that leave for 3-4 weeks at a time and they come back. And so, there's no pressure, there's no judgment. And, both of you that are on this right now have been in one of the calls. You kind of know what it is. It's a different flavor. Dave is a fast talker from New York. Lt.Col Joe's his name. And then our third partner, Van Ly Demon. Now that I know how to say her name, because she put it on LinkedIn now.
Hey, Jeff, I was gonna say exactly. Dave needs to do the same doggone thing
Yeah.
with his last name.
He does. We're just out there simply trying to help people to make a bigger impact. And that's why, as we've gone along on this, and it's kind of it's kind of like the power of our story when you got your logo and, even what's next beyond service, you have yours. It's kind of that next evolution of, hey, let's get that out there. Let's tell people we're here. And that's really all we want to do is help. If we can affect one person, then it's more than worth our time.
Jeff, you guys are impacting more than that one person. I completely get that. I feel the same way with what we're doing here. And I know Sarah feels the same way. Sarah, man, she's building this, big umbrella that she's bringing folks in. She calls them protectors, and she's building this platform. And you guys are doing the same thing. This is all about goodness. It's all about reaching out to let folks know that, hey, there are people out here that care. There are people that have gone through these things that you're going through. It might not be exactly what that you're going through now, but going through tough times lends to having the ability to get through it. And when you want to share those things and help people, whether it's job related, whether it's a personal matter, everyone needs someone to talk to. I grew up with, hey, figure it out, and okay. And I figured it out, but you know what? That's not always the right answer. And sometimes you do need space and you do need to be able to talk to somebody. And sometimes folks, maybe they don't have the resources to talk to a professional, or maybe it's not at that level, but sometimes it's having an ear and someone that has a heart for caring and those things that can change your perspective when someone gives a damn about you. And even if it's just on a call like this, but that's where we are in life right now. Our technology enables us to reach out. So why wouldn't we use this for good? And I tell you, you guys, it is, I come on as much as I can, because just like what we're doing now, it's in the middle of the day and sometimes it's hard to do that. But, the favorite part of your day, I leave feeling that same way when I've connected with you guys on the show, because it's always, it's like a roller coaster, right? It's funny, it is heartwarming, and sometimes what folks talk about is like, oh my gosh, but then you want to be there for them. You want to try to help them along. You guys just do that so well. And anyone that listens to this show today, you need to connect with Jeff on LinkedIn, and then find out about, as he said, the link for what they do with Angels 14, because you will leave inspired and you will leave realizing, hey, you know what? There is another tribe out there that I can connect with, because folks talk after the show too. There's an after show discussion, and it leads to building friendships again beyond just that little bit of time that you spend, whenever you have time to do so on Fridays. So, well, Jeff, we're at an hour and 10 minutes. So I don't want to shut you down here, but is there anything else that you want to share about Angels 14, or anything else that you want to promote or plug?
You know, Angels 14 is that I really wanted to end it on that note, simply because that's something that I encourage everybody to look at. I encourage everybody to look at the power of our story, or whatever tribe that they might be drawn to, because we, you know, you were talking about it, you know, going through pain and those types of things, and the technology and how to use that. Pain brings impact. So you can decide to use that pain and carry it on and keep it within inside you, or you can use it for good. And that's where, you know, even my story, which, you know, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of anguish, there was a lot of angst and all that, you know, and there was pain involved, and it sucked, but there's so many others out there that are so much worse off. It's all about perspective. And so you can find, you know, you can find our LinkedIn page too. Angels 14 it is out there now too. It's kind of in development, so there's not a lot there. We're also working on a website right now, which we're going to hope to, you know, produce pretty soon. But hey, I am so honored, Scott and Sarah, that you would have me on here, and hopefully your audience gets something out of it.
Oh, I have no doubt they will. You know, I know Sarah probably wants to chime in here. She's probably fit to be tied. Sarah, what you got?
Sorry,
Let's see, maybe
some message came up on my screen here. I really love this talk. And the reason is because I felt like it was so concise from 2 years before transitioning to where you are now. You broke it down so clearly for people who are going through this. And I really appreciate that. There's so many nuggets. I took so many notes. And then I just appreciate you, Jeff. You know I do. And I think because even from the very first time that I met you, when you came on The Power of Our Story, there's little things that people can do that really tell a lot about them. And it was very clear right at the beginning that you are a man who does care. You are a man of integrity that makes sure, wants things to be right. You are the type of person that people can build trust with. And that is such a powerful foundation. And it is, I'll tell you, it's a bright light in these days, especially. So Jeff, I appreciate you so much. Again, Scott, you are one of my favorites. Actually, a lot of the same attributes that I appreciate about Jeff, you have too. So this was just a great talk. And I really appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. Really, really appreciate that. It means a lot.
Yeah, it really does, Sarah. And, you know, this is a big group hug here, I guess, but, you know, we feel the same way about you too, and everything that you're doing. And I know it was mentioned here at some point when we were talking that tomorrow you're going to have, is it 10 to 12 tomorrow, or 10 in the morning till 12 Pacific time? Is that right, Sarah?
That's right. We're doing it 1 hour earlier because Doc Shauna Springer, that's the only time that she can come on. And we're just really trying to support the mental health and the perspective of what many of our protectors are going through right now with, you know, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, with the events in Afghanistan and people questioning their time in active duty. She's going to really set some things straight, and I think bring a lot of relief and clarity. And then Jennifer is going to come on at 11, Jennifer Tracy, and really give some great tools in how to handle some overwhelming emotions that may come up for people. So I'm really excited about having them come on.
Yeah, those are two big hitters too. I mean, if you know their backstory, you're going to want to tune in to this. And I know by the time folks see what we're talking about now, I guess it's going to be, you know, after the fact. But anyone who might be on live right now, yeah, absolutely. Those two, they are able to do such great things. They've taken their experience in life and they're doing what Jeff's doing. They're giving back, and it's so powerful. And so in closing here real quick, just so you know as well, Sarah, the calendar for folks to come, that will be on this show over the coming weeks. I've got a situation where two might have to shift gears on it. So in talking with Jeff, it sounds like Jeff, Dave, and Vaughn will be able to come not next Thursday, but the Thursday after. And we're going to talk more about Angels 14. And you'll be able to see the personalities involved in all that. And it's going to, I absolutely, it's going to be wide open. I can just tell, which is good because that's going to be fun. Right. So we'll probably laugh, cry, all those good things together, but it'll be a show that folks are going to absolutely not want to miss. So, okay. Well, I want to get that plug in there real quick. Hey, Jeff, thank you so much, brother. You're a good man. Like Sarah said, I'm so glad that we're connections, we're friends. I'm proud of you, what you're doing. And we're not too far from each other. So we're going to have to connect at some point and have a beer or two and continue the story in that regard. So
all three of us.
Yeah. Well, hey, yeah, hey, absolutely. Because Sarah is not too far from where I am. Thank you for keeping me straight there, boy. Yeah. Don't want to forget that.
I think she understood it. I was just throwing that out there.
Well, no. Hey, good on you. All right. Well, hey, have a great rest of the day. And Sarah, I am absolutely going to plan to be there tomorrow. Unless something happens, I'll be tuning in tomorrow from 10 to 12. So Jeff,
Great.
Thanks again. Have a great day and everyone take care.
Always love and respect, guys.
Thank you.